She was living in a single room with 3 other individuals. One of them was a male, and the other 2, well, the other 2 were females. God only knows what they were up to in there. And furthermore, Susan, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised to learn that all 4 of them habitually smoke marijuana cigarettes. Marijuana cigarettes.
And welcome to Mountain High Time. I'm your host, DJ Ransom, the Freedomist. And thanks for joining us. Here on Revolution.Radio. And today we got a guest that I think you'll enjoy with a lot of information to give us. But anyway, let's welcome to Mountain High Time San Francisco Bay Area architect Richard Gage, AIA, member of the American Institute of Architects and founder and former CEO of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. He now leads the charge for a new World Trade Center investigation along with his courageous wife, Gail, at richardgage911.org. Mr. Gage became interested in researching the destruction of the World Trade Center high-rises after hearing a startling conclusions of a reluctant 9/11 researcher, David Ray Griffin, on the radio in 2006, which launched his own unyielding quest for the truth about 9/11, the organization he founded, Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Now, that organization numbers 3,600 architects and engineers demanding a new investigation into the destruction of all 3 World Trade Center high-rise buildings on 9/11. As an architect, he has worked on most types of building constructions, including numerous fireproofed, steel-framed buildings. Most recently, he worked on a construction for a $400 million mixed-use urban project with 1.2 million square feet of retail, parking structure, and mid-rise office space. Altogether, about 1,200 tons of steel and framing. So I'm going to go ahead and try to get Richard on the line, or add him to the call here.
Hi, Ransom.
Hello. How's it going, Mr. Gage?
Really good. How are you doing?
Pretty good. And I just ran through your introduction. I hope I didn't stutter too much in it. I do that sometimes, but I think I got it out pretty clear. And I'm sure that a lot of the audience here is probably familiar with a lot of the ideas, but probably not in a detailed way I feel like you would be presenting. So I'm going to go ahead and be the ignorant student trying to learn and just let you go from there, because I realize you have a well put together presentation.
All right. Well, let's see if that's true. And we're live, right?
Yeah, we're live on Revolution.Radio, Studio B.
All right. So you're saying that we're live right now. Hi, everybody.
Yeah. And, I guess I kind of got into 9/11 right away because I watched it live on TV like a lot of people. And then, questions started building up for me. And I sought a lot of research. I've been really kind of prominent since 2001 about the subject. And if you know what's going on geopolitically, like as we speak right now, they're pretty much trying to set off World War III. I think all of the information that you're going to present is very connected to the times we live in now, and who runs things and why things happen.
Yeah, I do completely agree. We've lost our civil liberties with 9/11. It set up the whole problem with COVID and gave it a platform from which to operate. And now with Gaza, another false flag operation. We're seeing the results of that today, as you suggested.
Yeah. Right now, they have Iranian missiles bombing down. I guess that's what's trending. So,
Drones.
Yeah, drones. Excuse me.
Yeah, they're heading over to Israel, and from all the looks of it.
It's they've given us 2 decades worth of I'm going to call it the New American Century program, and that's basically has a lot to do with what you present, correct?
Yes, Project for a New American Century is a group of neocons who came in with Bush into the administration in 2000 and 2001 or 2000. And then in 2001, September, what do we get? The results of their goals, which they outlined in the paper, Rebuilding America's Defenses, in which they wanted regional hegemony in the Middle East, a vast increase in the military budget. And they said, though, in that paper, absent a catalyzing and catastrophic event like a new Pearl Harbor, these goals will likely take a long time. And Bush writes in his diary, today we had our new Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, just the right amount of people.
Yeah.
So I guess you have some slides. I know the people on the radio can't see your slides, but I will be airing it later on Rumble and Mountain High Time YouTube channel, so people can see what we're talking about.
Well, right on. And I'll be as descriptive as I can also for that reason. You see the slides now?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, I don't want your audience to be the last to know. I certainly felt like I was in 2006 when I heard David Ray Griffin talking about this on KPFA's Guns and Butter program. He's written now 14 books on this subject and has been a great help to all of us in the 9/11 Truth movement. And it just turned my world upside down when I realized, for instance, that there was a third tower that came down. And that, I mean, it was simply shocking. This was something that I had no clue of. I'm one of 90,000 members of the American Institute of Architects. We didn't get one bulletin on this, the third worst structural failure in modern history. So this building is 47 stories tall, Ransom. I mean, it's got it's taller than most of the buildings in most of our states. In fact, it just looks dwarfed next to the Twin Towers, which stole the show on 9/11, of course. But each floor is an acre in size.
Wow.
And so it's part of the World Trade Center complex. Larry Silverstein acquired it in just 6 weeks. Well, Larry Silverstein built it in the late 80s, and then he acquired the rest of the buildings of the World Trade Center complex in just 6 weeks before 9/11. So that's rather extraordinary. He invests $15 million of his own money in a project that he leveraged, financial project, to more than $3.5 billion. And then he walks away with it after putting a whole lot of terrorist insurance. He walks away, a rich man, walking away on 9/11 after 9/11 with $5.68 billion. So the building wasn't hit by a plane. So it's an easy case study, you know. It shouldn't have come down, right? No jet fuel, no plane. What what brought it down? Well, let's see how it comes down first. We have a isolated event in the Upper East penthouse here. And then 6 seconds later, this happens straight down, uniformly, symmetrically into its own footprint in under 7 seconds. We're going to break that down. But I mean, we've all seen this in like the old hotels in Las Vegas, for instance. So this is a familiar type of collapse to almost all of us, which is why they did not want us to know about it. This, presumably, they did not. This should have been the most studied structural failure ever. After all, as we'll see, we've never lost a steel frame skyscraper due to what?
Fire?
Office fires. And here's the official narrative from Shyam Sunder.
What we found was that uncontrolled building fires caused an extraordinary event. The collapse of World Trade Center 7 was primarily due to fire.
Fires. Okay, well, let's look at those fires, Ransom. We've got a few. These are the worst fires that we have any photographic or video evidence of in these buildings. As you can see, they're few, they're small, and they're scattered throughout the building. Right. And they're burned out more than an hour before the collapse of this building at 5:20 in the afternoon, 7 hours after the towers were hit. So again, this is I see what's happening. Hang on 1 second, Ransom.
Okay.
Building, I'm going to switch.
Building 7 is the same as the Solomon building, correct?
Building 7 is the same as the Solomon Brothers building. They occupied a whole lot of floors on this building, by the way, in this building. Oh, yeah, I see what happened. I grabbed the wrong one, so I got confused. That is correct. And that's why a lot of people do call it the Solomon Brothers building. And let's just jump back.
Yeah, the only reason I even know that is because that's, the famous clip of the British journalist there that was talking about it collapsing while it was still in the background.
Oh, yeah, we're going to show her, too. This is James Stanley of the BBC.
All right. I'll try to cut the spoilers out here. And I'll shut up.
Well, here's a spoiler. We've got much hotter, larger, and longer lasting fires in these types of buildings. But guess what? They've never in history brought down a steel frame fire protected building ever. This is absolutely amazing. In fact, not since 9/11 either, where we've had much hotter, larger, and longer lasting fires like these fully engulfed skyscrapers. They didn't come down either. And yet Building 7 came down with those few small fires. Let's compare Building 7 collapse to a known controlled demolition, a series of them on the right. Building 7 on the left. Is there any similarity?
Are you share screening?
Yeah. Oh, I forgot.
There you go.
I see what happened.
There we go.
You can see the whole screen now?
No, I just I realized you had turned it off there. That's all.
It turned it off by itself when I dumped the. Let's stop this one and start it again and go to that one and go. So we're back on?
Yes, there we go.
Yay. So we've got, again, no steel frame skyscrapers collapsed due to fire, and we have an uncanny resemblance to an explosive controlled demolition. So how does that even happen? We need to, in fact, there it is, ask ourselves, did NIST consider this hypothesis as a viability? No. even though it looks exactly like a controlled demolition, even though fire, the official cause of this building's collapse, has never in history brought down a steel frame fire-protected skyscraper. So they relegated it to a set of very frequently asked questions, actually, 10 years later on their website, saying, oh, no, this wasn't a controlled demolition. We would have heard massive explosions. Well, we'll hear some witnesses of explosions, in fact, but let's first ask ourselves, are there any of the features of a typical controlled demolition in this building? And so, first of all, like a sudden onset of destruction, well, the building is standing still, and then we see this all of a sudden, and narrated by actor. That's funny.
Probably.
Yeah, exactly. Dan Rather.
Seeing are high shots. Now, here we're going to show you a videotape of the collapse itself.
Actually, it froze there. Maybe you can restart it.
Of this building.
Oh, it froze on you, huh?
Yeah, I see the buildings collapsed.
Are high shots.
How about this one?
Now, here we're going to show
no,
you
I
a
don't see it.
videotape of the collapse itself.
But we can listen to it.
Videotape the collapse of this building.
Well, we got to show you the collapse of the building. Why is Skype not picking up the visual?
High shots.
Yeah.
I just see buildings, a picture of side by sides.
Now we go to videotape the collapse of this building.
Well, that's the previous. I'm going to stop the share again.
Yeah, I think it just froze on you. That's all.
Yeah. And then let's start it again. And it is indeed this one. Current. And then that and that and that and the whole window. That.
There we go. I think that should be it.
Let's try that.
All right.
Listen to Dan Rather, actor.
And what you're seeing are high shots.
Is that running?
Now, here we're going to show you a videotape of the collapse itself. Describe that. Now we go to videotape the collapse of this building.
It's amazing.
Amazing, incredible, pick your word. For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
Well, that's very helpful, right? Dan's using his intuition here to share with us what he's seen and has a frame of reference for. We all should be using our intuition with things like this. And it's harder with the Twin Towers, which we'll get to. But with Building 7, there's no loss of life, according to the official narrative, in the building on 9/11. And so we're less traumatized by it. Some of us, most of all of us, didn't know that it even happened.
Right.
So let's see. Is there a straight down symmetrical progression? Let's look from West Street and see what we can learn here. Yeah, pretty straight down, pretty symmetrical. So this is incredible. I mean, how do you do that? You have to remove all of the core columns, 24 of them, at once, within a fraction of a second of each other, followed about a second later by the perimeter columns on that floor, within a fraction of a second of each other also. And then repeat that on every floor. Any deviation in that pattern, the building will begin to tip over.
Right.
Do these fires have that level of precision? Unlikely. So we have a real problem here with the official narrative right from the get-go. But how fast is a building coming down? We have David Chandler, physics teacher, clocking the building at free fall acceleration. for at least of a third of its 7-second fall. NIST finally admits, after denying this for years, they're forced to admit it in being publicly embarrassed in a press conference by members of AE 9/11 Truth, the organization I founded 18 years ago. And so now they finally acknowledge, okay, it came down in free fall. Well, what does that mean? That's as fast as a bowling ball falling out of the sky. It's getting faster and faster, in fact, each second, the definition of free fall. There's nothing slowing it down, not even 40,000 tons of structural steel. Well, where did the steel go? Those columns provide a lot of resistance, and they had to have all been removed within a fraction of a second of each other. So let's look at feature number 5, the total dismemberment of the building. It falls like a house of cards, meaning the columns and beams had to have been severed one from another. This is a moment-resisting steel frame skyscraper where the columns and beams are rigidly welded one to another. But it falls neatly into a pile 4 to 6 stories tall. Buildings that fall due to natural causes, you don't have the columns and beams severed one from another, so the building is relatively intact, certainly damaged.
Right.
The concrete is not, huh?
Oh, I was going to say, everybody got a chance to see this right after the powerful earthquake of Taiwan. That was on every channel, the building that fell over intact into the street. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I've got to put that one up here. When did that happen? I
It was just like a week ago, that Taiwan 7.4 earthquake.
Oh, so a lot of those buildings came over, not just that one?
I think there was some collapses, but that's the main one that was going around the social media network. So I know millions and millions of people are familiar with that.
Gotcha. Very helpful. The last week earthquake. That's pretty important. I'll get it in the slideshow too. The concrete here is not pulverized to a fine powder also, which is what we have at Building 7. So what could cause this? Let's listen to see if there's any witnesses of explosions, like Daryl, a medical student on hand that evening, interviewed on 1010 Winds Radio.
We were watching the building actually because it was on fire. The bottom floors of the building were on fire, and we heard this sound that sounded like a clap of thunder. Turned around, we were shocked to see that the building was. It looked like there was a shock wave ripping through the building, and the windows all busted out, and it was horrifying. And then about a second later, the bottom floor caves out, and the building followed after that, and we saw the building crash down all the way to the ground.
That's very helpful. How about Kevin McPadden, former Air Force medic who was nearby, having served as a first responder?
You heard explosions, like boom. It's like a distinct sound. It's not like when in compression, like boom, 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 like floors that were dropping and collapsing. This was boom, and like you felt a rumble in the ground, like almost like you wanted to grab onto something. That, to me, I knew that was an explosion. There was no doubt in my mind.
Oh, that's very helpful. And this gentleman, Bill Rosati, who saw flashes of light.
I was standing like 2 blocks away, and all of a sudden I just seen a big flash, and then I seen the building coming down, and I just seen people just running everywhere, chaotic like.
And that's very helpful. How about Captain Richard Patterson of the FDNY?
1-7 let go as well, and was a series of concussive explosions.
And first responder Patrick Dillon.
I remember feeling that, like it was like freight trains underneath the earth, shaking the earth, even shaking me. That's when we all saw Building 7 crumple in the middle, like way up at the top. It buckled, and then dropped.
And if there were witnesses of explosions, and there were explosions before the building came down, then you'd have to somebody would have to have gotten in there to set those explosives. People would have foreknowledge of such an event in advance of the building coming down, like Chief Nick Visconti, who says, we're moving the command post over this way. That building's coming down, referring to Building 7. And Chief Hayden, who's talking to a engineer, and he says, if we allow it to burn, how soon could we anticipate a collapse? And the guy says, in its current state, you have about 5 hours. Wait a minute. Time out. No steel frame fire protected structure has ever collapsed due to fire alone. So how in the world is he predicting a collapse of this building unless he knew it was coming down at about 5 o'clock? The prediction could only have been made with foreknowledge, of course. And so they won't release the name of this engineer. He remains anonymous, as do these mysterious construction workers walking away from Building 7, hearing an explosion over their shoulder, looking back at the building, and then looking straight into the CNN camera and saying this.
Keep your eye on that building. It'll be coming down. The building is about to blow up. Moving back. All right, guys?
We are walking back. There's a building about to blow up. On flame. Debris coming down.
The building is about to blow up. Flame and debris coming down. How do they know? What's really going on here? And what else did these two first responders, Patrick Dillon in this case, experience in the building?
And he pointed to what turned out to be the entrance to Building 7's lobby. He said, go in there, take a break, there's other guys in there, like that. And that's what I did. I finished coming down off the pile and climbed over the wreckage of Vesey, and went in those revolving doors and just kind of fell on the floor. There were other guys in there doing the same thing I was, just shaking their heads and spitting out poison and trying to get their lungs back together again, as I was. And I was on the floor. These battalion chiefs come in through the revolving doors. There was 3 of them. They had the white helmets. I didn't get any IDs off them. But as soon as they stepped inside, what stepped in behind them were these 2 people in black with black ski masks on, and Uzis, and the Uzis were hanging off their necks, and I don't know what they were or who they were, but the battalion chiefs started yelling at us, right, ordering us to get out of this building. They're going to pull the building. Everybody out now, and they ordered us back out.
Well, this is getting very interesting to me. Guys with black Uzis. And they're ordering the building. They're going to pull the building, the battalion chiefs say. This is incredible. Wow. Yeah. But listen to Captain. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say, I've only ever seen Uzis deployed on anyone one time. And that was the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan. The Secret Service had Uzis on that day. And that's the only video footage or any reference that I know of anyone ever being deployed or in any kind of op with an Uzi was the Secret Service.
Yeah.
I just thought I would interject that. I'm sorry. Yeah. Wow.
Well, you can access Uzis though. I mean, I think the Mossad uses them as well, and others.
So he and I made our way over to.
So this is Captain Richard Patterson again. Uh-oh. And he had an experience as well here.
All right. And he pointed.
Here we go.
So he and I made our way over to the entrance of the building. Before we arrived there was a construction worker who happened to be, he emerged from the dust cloud and walked past the chief and I. And he said, he had overheard the chief's comment, and he paused and said, that'll be coming down around 5 o'clock.
Again, yet another
we arrive at 7, and
witness.
there were 2 paramilitarily clad men with black rifles, sunglasses. And as we approached the entrance, they closed ranks and said, one of them said, "This building has been secured," which is odd because in my experience in the FDNY, anybody preventing access to the fire department in the event of a fire, that's a criminal act. The chief and I were not in a position to argue the point, given the inequality in weaponry present.
These are two other guys, because he had specified earlier that these guys had beige colored khakis on and they weren't wearing sunglasses, whereas the other guys were dressed in black with ski masks and they had Uzis, and these are longer rifles. So there's two pair of different military types.
Yeah,
very
ops are going on there.
Yeah. So, and of course, Larry Silverstein is associated with his close ties to the Israeli mafia. Others have identified that, and so who knows who they really are. They didn't get an accent off of them. But this is getting very interesting, and it's even more interesting. Listen to this. This gentleman is Kevin McPadden, former Air Force medic, who earlier we heard his witnessing of explosions before the building came down. But before those explosions, which he heard, he's listening to a radio held in the hands of a Red Cross worker. And this is what he hears.
At the last few seconds, he took his hand off, and you heard 3, 2, 1.
Okay. Do fires bring buildings down to countdowns? What's really going on here? How does the BBC know that this building is going to collapse 20 minutes before it ever did?
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago, I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. Apparently that's only a few hundred yards away from where the World Trade Center towers were. And it seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attacks. We'll probably find out more now about that from our correspondent, Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy.
Sketchy indeed. Here's Building 7 still standing behind her.
Right.
And they announced not only that the building collapsed a little more than 20 minutes after, before it happened, but the reason it collapsed due to structural weakening when the towers came down. This is very, very interesting. Not to be outdone by the BBC, CNN announces the collapse at 11:07. Let's listen.
In New York, Alan Dodd-Frank joins us on the phone in Lower Manhattan. Alan?
Alan, just 2 or 3 minutes ago, there was yet another collapse or explosion. I'm now out of sight. A Good Samaritan has taken me in on Duane Street. But at 11:15, there was another collapse or explosion following the 10:30 collapse of the second tower. And a firefighter who rushed by us estimated that 50 stories went down. The street filled with smoke. It was like a forest fire roaring down a canyon.
Wait a minute. There was no other 50-story building that went down. There was no other building that was completely demolished. There were some partially damaged buildings. They're referring to a building went down at 10:45. Well, had that building 7, which is 47 stories, come down at that time, we wouldn't even have any videos of it because the whole lower Manhattan was completely obscured by these massive dust clouds released when the Twin Towers were destroyed. So was it supposed to come down at 10:45? And was it a dud?
It sounds like there was some kind of technical glitch there.
And what about those mysterious construction workers we saw walking away from Building 7 later in the early afternoon? Were they fixing that glitch? And that's how they knew it was going to come down. It's pretty fascinating. When you start connecting these dots, especially with Larry Silverstein, the owner of Building 7, developed it in the 80s, talking about it here on PBS Radio. And he releases this information about it.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
Okay, this is very interesting. We watched the building pull, and we watched the building collapse. So he's saying, later, because people said, what do you mean pull the building? Well, I meant pull the firefighters out of the building, he says. Well, wait, the firefighters weren't in the building. They were told not to fight the fires. And they were told that it was going to come down on its own. So, and firefighters don't pull buildings, they put out fires, especially yeah.
Oh, I was going to ask that. That's some lingo that's not really in too many industries there.
Yeah, right. It's a term used in the controlled demolition industry to bring it down. So pretty darn interesting. What does this top European controlled demolition expert say?
Danny Jowenko is the expert on this in Europe. What did he say?
Dit is controlled demolition. Zeker weten. Zeker weten. Er is nagesprongen. Dit is in opdracht gebeurd. Het heeft een team gedaan van experts.
Okay, experts like 36 structural engineers signed on to the petition demanding a new investigation, like Kamal obeyed. A localized failure in a steel frame building cannot cause a catastrophic collapse like a house of cards without a simultaneous and patterned loss of several of its columns at key locations within the building. Does that sound like something fires can do?
No.
And so the University of Alaska got involved. One of the top forensic structural engineers in the country, Professor Leroy Halsey, engaging in a 4-year study that NIST was tasked to do by Congress, but failed miserably. He used all of their computer modeling and to find out what the steel would do in response to the fire that NIST said was in that area at that time, which was not. It had moved on, and the fires, in fact, and they were burned out at that time. But through all of their computer modeling, the U.S. government on the right has 400 structural steel sections failing every second, and still they can't get their computer model to look like the video in the middle. Instead, except for the east penthouse and the isolated event 6 seconds before the overall collapse, they stop it 2 seconds after. They won't even let us see what happens after that, because obviously it's beginning to tip over, and we can't show you that. They had 6 years to develop this model. The University of Alaska couldn't get the building to collapse at all, with column 79, 80, and 81 in the northeast corner collapsing, which was NIST's theory. But when they took out all the columns at once, they got it to collapse just like the video of the building's collapse in the center. So that's pretty telling. So they concluded after all this time that fire did not cause the collapse of Building 7. The temperatures were not hot enough to cause the weakening of the steel framing. Further, the thermal expansion did not result in the loss of support for the beams and the girders. And the building didn't experience a progressive collapse as claimed by NIST, but a global collapse caused by the near simultaneous failure of all of its columns. So they don't speculate what could do that, but they know what could do that. Controlled demolitions do that. And there's a variety of ways to produce a controlled demolition, and they leave evidence behind. In the case of incendiaries, they would leave behind molten steel and iron. So we look for evidence of ignited thermite. Thermite is an incendiary used by the military to cut through steel like a hot knife through butter, which produces 4,000 degree temperatures. Well, FEMA did the first report in 2002, the Building Performance Assessment Team report. In Appendix C, they put their metallurgical examination of the steel from Building 7 and the Twin Towers. What do they find? Never before observed eutectic reactions causing intergranular melting, capable of turning a solid steel girder into Swiss cheese, like this piece of World Trade Center 7 steel, with silver dollar size holes. Well, wait a minute. Office fires can't do this to structural steel, even unprotected structural steel. Why? Because office fires are only burning 500 degrees, maybe 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. But this steel suffered temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees. So that's more than 2 to 4 times the temperatures. Well, this is incredible. What else do they find? Rapid oxidation, sulfidation, liquid iron, that's molten iron exceeding 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Sulfur formed during this hot corrosion attack on the steel. Well, where did the sulfur come from? NIST says, the New York Times finds this is perhaps the deepest mystery uncovered in the investigation. But it's completely thrown out, this entire Appendix C, metallurgical examination of the steel, from NIST's final report, because it didn't meet their criteria of supporting their phony, fraudulent conclusions. And so, even though, and it shows the presence of sulfur, which they tried to talk away. So yeah, it takes 4,000 degrees to evaporate steel, and that's what the author, Jonathan Barnett, saw as steel members in the debris pile that appear to have been partly evaporated in extraordinarily high temperatures.
That's where the bubbles in the steel come from? Or the missing pieces, I'm sorry.
I didn't see any bubbles. Oh, you mean the silver dollar size
The holes, yes. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's melted steel. That's partially evaporated steel is what here is documented by Abulhassan Astani, Azel. And he had a National Science Foundation grant to study the steel. So here he is seeing evaporation of the steel beam. This piece is from World Trade Center 7. And he doesn't know how this happened, doesn't speculate, but we can see molten steel or iron pouring out of the material held in the hands of the jaws of the crab claw excavator. We could tell, because of the physics of molten materials, what the temperature is by the color. We're exceeding 2,500 degree temperatures Fahrenheit here. Well, there's nothing in the official narrative that can account for temperatures of that magnitude, either in Building 7 or in the Twin Towers, where there were jet fuel.
And this is during cleanup, right? This is long afterwards. It's still molten.
This is during the cleanup, yeah. right here. And the jet fuel manufacturer, ME Petroleum, says, hey, the jet fuel doesn't burn more than 600 degrees Fahrenheit in open air. So it's not contributing to those temperatures whatsoever. But we have evidence of those temperatures not only in the molten metal, but in the dust as well, found by the U.S. Geological Survey in their 2005 Particle Atlas of the World Trade Center dust. What do they find? Billions of previously molten, that's over 3,000 degrees, iron. We haven't used iron in our skyscrapers for 100 years or so. This is elemental iron, cast iron. Where did it come from? Like cast iron. Microspheres, about the diameter of a human hair. We'll come back to why these are spherical. But up to 6% of many of these samples are composed of these previously molten iron microspheres. That's more than 4 tons by extrapolation in all the World Trade Center dust. That's a lot of evidence of ignited thermite. In fact, but they don't know that. They don't say that. The USGS, the EPA says, we don't know what this stuff is, but it's a signature component of the World Trade Center dust. And in other words, it's not even World Trade Center dust unless it has all these previously molten iron microspheres. Documented also by the environmental consulting firm, R.J. Lee Group, an international firm, who says these are formed during the event, not before, by the iron workers putting the building together, not afterward by the iron workers taking the building apart, but during the event. Well, where do these come from? Experiment is the arbiter of competing hypotheses. And let's run an experiment with thermite, which produces thousands of what look like sparks, but which cool and fall into the pan as molten, previously molten iron microspheres. So we know where they come from. They're spherical because surface tension forms themselves, forms aerosolized liquids into spheres. Could that be what's toasting the tops of these cars in this extremely high heat event? Is there any evidence of unignited thermite? If that was evidence of ignited thermite in molten iron and molten iron spheres, and it could only be evidence of ignited thermite, is there any evidence of unignited thermite in the World Trade Center dust? Well, Niels Harrit led a team of 8 international scientists into the study of this dust. They were sent 7 independently collected samples, like this one from Jeanette McKinley's apartment. Her apartment across the South Tower on Liberty Street. All those windows were blown in by the massive explosions over there that we'll get into, and filled their apartments full of dust. She's an artist, and she took great care to work in her artistry work with the dust because she was traumatized by it. So it was her way of healing from it. Unfortunately, it cost her her life. She died of brain cancer. And but one of these 4 samples is from her dust. And the team finds the same curious red-gray chips in all of the samples. They thought they were just paint chips because they're dual layered, red on one side, gray on the other. So they're applied with a fluid, but they're attracted with a magnet, meaning they have an extremely high iron content. So, A, this is not paint with this level of iron content. B, the team analyzes the red layer with X-ray energy dispersive spectroscopy and finds what? Iron oxide. That's elemental iron. It's not steel. And aluminum, the key ingredients of thermite. What are the key ingredients of thermite doing in this paint? Shouldn't be there. They get real curious. They zoom in 50,000 times with an electron microscope, and they find rhomboidal-shaped iron oxide crystals and aluminum platelets, 1,000 times smaller than the diameter of a human hair. Wait a minute. What is that stuff doing there, set in a matrix of oxygen, silica, and carbon? Well, this is organic material, which is used in high energy explosives like TNT and RDX to expand rapidly because it turns into gases and knocks things over. That's how high energy explosives work. So, whereas incendiaries work by means of destroying things with massive heat, 4,000 degrees. So have we got something here that's an incendiary which is being engineered to become more explosive? Looks like that, because Lawrence Livermore Lab developed this stuff prior to 2001, and they called it super thermite, explosive composites based on thermite reactions. And it's an extremely fine mixing of aluminum and iron oxide, because when you get the particles so small, you have an instantaneous reaction, and it becomes more explosive. Well, what the Lawrence Livermore Lab found was that this stuff, the chips from the super thermite, they ignite at about 800 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, that's very interesting, because that's exactly what the 4 samples studied by the team of 8 with the World Trade Center dust found. About 800 degrees they ignite, producing what when they ignite? Molten iron microspheres with the same chemical signature as the molten iron microspheres found in all the World Trade Center dust by R.J. Lee and the USGS. So we know exactly where those molten iron microspheres came from, as if we didn't know. They're found attached to partially ignited red-gray chips, as you see here and here. Well, that's pretty darn interesting. This stuff is extremely sophisticated. It's not made in a cave in Afghanistan. It's made only in the most advanced defense contracting laboratories. And this 25-page peer-reviewed paper in the Bentham Open Chemical Physics Journal, published in 2009, documents that it's active, unreacted, thermitic material incorporating nanotechnology. It's a highly energetic and pyrotechnic or explosive material. We've given this paper to every member of Congress on at least 2 occasions over the last 18 years. We've also given them our latest documentaries, our booklets, and our pamphlets, and our DVDs. Specifically, the DVD documentary 9/11 Explosive Evidence, Experts Speak Out. Because we want them to have all the evidence, which shows the 10 key characteristic features of controlled demolition, and some very uncharacteristic features also. Because incendiaries, while they've been used rarely for controlled demolitions, there are patented devices prior to 9/11 which shows that they indeed can.
All right.
So
let's pause here for the commercial break and get right back into it when we get back in about 5 minutes.
This is Mysteries in the Histories. A mysterious manuscript, roughly 250-page book written in an entirely unknown language and writing system. It's been carbon dated back to the 1400s and includes illustrations of plants that don't resemble any known species, believed to have been intended as a medical text. It's named for the Polish book dealer who purchased it in 1912. This is the mystery of the Voynich manuscript. Since its discovery in 1912, the 15th century Voynich manuscript has been a strange, mysterious cult phenomenon captivating the minds of many. Its first confirmed owner was Georg Barisch, from 1585 to 1662, an alchemist from Prague, who discovered it in his library. Barisch tried to investigate the manuscript's origins to no avail. The manuscript, full of handwriting in an unknown language, zodiac symbols, naked women and strange objects like unknown plants, seemed to be from another time, or even another world. For centuries, this book repeatedly changed hands. When it was purchased by Voynich, who posited that it was authored by Albertus Magnus, an alchemist, or Roger Bacon, an early scientist. People believed that Voynich himself fabricated the manuscript, although that theory wouldn't explain the carbon dating of the paper and ink to the 15th century. The book itself bears no indication of its authors, about 6 inches by 9 inches and around 232 pages decorated, not unlike others in the illuminated age. Wrapped in vellum, with vellum pages, the manuscript features 116 folded folios bound in 18 bundles. The binding of the book is old and busted, though it is not original to the text. Many of the pages are fold-outs, some are missing. Inside the tome are innumerable lines of looping text, inked in iron gall in a medium typical of the Middle Ages, scribbled in a strange, unfamiliar language and a strange, unfamiliar script, incomprehensible, causing Voynich to conclude that the tome was written in code. Alongside the text, unknown if important or decorative, there is an abundance of illustrations and pictorial art. Composed of inks and pigments in tones and color palettes common to the 1400s, these illustrations seem to split the manuscript into 4 separate sections, including sections about botany, astronomy, and astrology, balneology, the science of the therapeutic use of baths, and pharmacology, as well as a 5th and final section, with blocks of text separated by stars. The first and largest section of the manuscript is the botany section that contains detailed drawings of plants as if from another world or a lost continent, plants no one can identify and no one has ever seen before. The astronomy and astrology section has illustrations of the stars, the sun, and the moon alongside several zodiac signs. Immersed in strange, shared baths, female figures frolic through the pages of the text's balneological section, while the pharmaceutical section is filled with what appears to be medicinal plants, indicated by the inclusion of medicinal bottles throughout this fantastical illustration. Like Voynich, many modern scholars suspect that the manuscript's text is a ciphered form of a familiar language, with their theories of the tome's latent linguistics flitting from Latin to Nahuatl, the language of the Aztecs and Toltecs of Mexico. Others say that the text is an artificial language or strange shorthand, and others still see the text as meaningless scribbles. The theories of the tome are, thus, all over the place, with no one opinion snagging widespread support. The Voynich manuscript continues to mystify medievalists and confuse cryptologists centuries after its supposed creation. It remains as impenetrable and inexplicable as ever. But is this truly one of the mysteries in the histories? To find out, sign up for our show notes. Sign up to our show notes email list and get access to longer episodes of Mysteries in the Histories just for signing up. Signing up for the show notes, you get behind-the-scenes thoughts and points we sometimes can't relay over social media platforms. Brought to you by ITM Trading. ITM Trading has spent the last 28-plus years developing a team of expert researchers and gold and silver analysts to make this possible. Simply put, we build strategies which are historically proven to protect your wealth and assets through any economic downturn. 866-834-1422. That's 834-1422.
Mountain High Time, 2 hours of an organization to the madness, discussing the ever-changing dynamics of being both physically and mentally prepared for a plethora of possible outcomes to our future and present. A look into the latest technologies, new scientific discoveries, and how they might be used in connection to the human domain and controlling it, ancient cultures and places. Be warned. This is an opinionated look through headlines, guests that are not afraid to question the narrative, a little bit of crazy ramblings of a stoner conspiracy factist that pushes constitutional concepts. The place and the time are the same, another dimension we call Mountain High Time. Saturdays 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Mountain High Time, right here on Revolution.Radio, where information never sleeps and truth breaks the spell.
Welcome back to Mountain High Time. We have guest Richard Gage from AIA architect who was breaking down 9/11 quite detailed for us. And I'm just going to let you get right into it because I felt like you were just getting into the roll of things right at the commercial break there. And I didn't want to interrupt you, but we had to let them play their spot there.
Oh, right on. We'll let them do that. That's just fine with me. I'm thinking we'll start right here. You see my screen now?
Yes, sir.
We have all 10 key characteristic features that we've just discussed of controlled demolition, and some uncharacteristic features as well, as I mentioned, incendiaries, very uncharacteristic. And so let's find out, with additional circumstantial corroborative evidence and testimony, since none of these can be created by fire, the official cause of this building's collapse, let alone all of them, with the additional witness testimony and so forth, we find this to be proof of controlled demolition. A body of proof that has convinced 3,600 architects and engineers to publicly sign on to the petition demanding a new investigation into the destruction of all 3 of these World Trade Center skyscrapers. We'll get to the Twin Towers next. But this evidence for Building 7 in particular so far has been packaged and given in 60 exhibits to the U.S. Attorney for a special grand jury investigation. And we have sued him to make sure that that happens. And we're going to continue our legal actions with the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 inquiry until we have success, because we've now been filmed with many of these experts, 3,600 altogether, a couple of dozen of which appear in the film series 9/11 Crime Scene to Courtroom. The first episode is coming out in this month. And we anticipate, Mick Harrison and I, an incredible success with the film, because we were filmed in Washington, D.C. with the experts, and now we're in post-edit. So we're editing the first episode, and they'll be rolling out every couple of weeks. And it's very exciting because this film series will be given to the grand jurors so that they can see how, with greater graphic dimension and explanation by Mick and myself in the boardroom of the grand jury, the virtual grand jury we had there. It's very exciting. People can co-produce the film, and we're asking you, everybody, to get involved and make it happen. Bring this evidence to light. Very important. That happens at richardgage911.org. Yeah, Ransom.
Yeah, I was going to say that's awesome. Over the years, I even shared some of the same slides that you had there, and it's been always an uphill battle. It's almost at this point now, 20 years later, like a JFK thing where people are like, yeah, I know that, but whatever, And I think that it was more of an important event than almost anyone that was born after. So there's a lot of people going to war right now that don't understand that there was a whole chain of events that led them to that, and 20 years of propaganda and unanswered questions. And some of, for me, I had an opportunity to go on a Pentagon tour when my wife worked at Andrews Air Force Base there. And in there is a 9/11 memorial that's kind of centrally located. And well, they didn't find my humor very funny because, I made a comment with a lot of people around that work there, how they figured that 100+ foot plane fit in that little 14-foot hole in that picture, because they have one of the pictures of the original hole that's only about 14, maybe 16 foot wide there. And they're saying that a plane disappeared into that hole. And I also have the benefit. My grandfather worked as a civil engineer after he retired from the Air Force at the high-speed test track at White Sands, New Mexico, is where I live now. And I had the opportunity to witness with my own eyes what a bunker buster can do through 4 or 5 different walls of reinforced concrete as a small child. So I was well aware that technology like that existed. And when I saw that hole for myself originally, I thought, that's exactly what that is. And since then, there have been many people that have brought forward evidence. And I know we're going to talk about the Twin Towers. There's been more confusion around the Twin Towers, I think, than maybe the Pentagon, because there's just so many theories out there with people that interject things that are not scientific. And that's what I appreciate about your approach, is that we're going step by step with detailed information that's factual and scientifically contrived.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And in fact, one of those steps is to ask ourselves a key question. If we've just proven that Building 7 was a controlled demolition, then we should all be a little more uncomfortable, because then we have to ask ourselves, is it possible that there was a controlled demolition at the Twin Towers? Because Building 7 happened on 9/11, Twin Towers happened, they're part of the same conspiracy. Well, let's look at the destruction and just intuitively ask ourselves, are we looking at a collapse, or are we looking at explosions? The towers came down 15 minutes apart. We show them here simultaneously to show their identicality, with upward, outward arching streamers, a geometry of fireworks, freely flying structural steel sections ejected laterally at 80 miles an hour, landing 600 feet in every direction, trailed by thick white smoke clouds. Where do we get thick white smoke clouds trailing steel structural members? Steel is not flammable under office fire conditions. Well, we just talked about the molten iron at the ends of the steel beams. What we didn't talk about was the other byproduct of thermite, aluminum oxide ash, which looks kind of like this, and which this can only be the effects of thermite, aluminum oxide ash trailing these structural steel sections. So let's get into it. We have, again, key features of controlled demolition. What are they? A sudden onset of destruction. The North Tower is standing still. All of a sudden, it's in uniform downward motion. No jolt, no hesitation upon impacting the cold, hard steel below. What about the South Tower? It's still, and all of a sudden, it's in uniform downward motion. And we'll talk about how fast that motion is in a moment. But the official narrative says, well, wait, above the point of jet plane impacts, the upper section drives the rest of the building down to the ground and then destroys itself. This is called the crush down, crush up theory by Zdeněk Bezant, a mathematical wizard from Northwestern University in Chicago. In just 2 days, he submitted this piece of mathematical wizardry, which took engineers 10 years to decode. And I'll show you what they found when they did decode it. But the rest of us are in shock. Our country's is under attack. We're trying to get all this information we can on TV and try to decipher when's the next attack coming, what the next plane, the next building. Who did this to us? Not this guy. He's in his den, theoretically, creating the paper that was submitted just 2 days later. It's absolutely incredible story. But it also suffers from Newton's third law of motion, which is what? There's an equal and opposite destructive force when two bodies collide. Take a Mack truck and a Volkswagen. Does it matter if we drop the Volkswagen onto the Mack truck? No. The upper part of a structure cannot, which is lighter and weaker, cannot possibly destroy the cold, hard, heavier, intact steel below. Upper part's very light. As you go down, it gets heavier and heavier and heavier. It's a virtual pyramid till halfway down you're 36 inches by 16 inches by 2 inches thick. But under that, it gets heavier and heavier and heavier until at the bottom, you're virtually solid steel, 52 inches by 22 inches. So it's not going to be destroyed by the Volkswagen. And in fact, you can see the Volkswagen destroying itself in the first 3 seconds. Let me make it easier for you. Watch the lower red line, the point of plane impacts. The upper part is telescoping in on itself. It's not destroying the lower part. In the first 2-3 seconds, it's itself being destroyed. And this video proves exactly that. If it were there, by the way, we would see it. But none of the photos, none of the videos show an upper part of the building destroying the lower part. What they show up on the upper left, as we've seen again, is upward, outward arching streamers, a geometry of fireworks, freely flying structural steel sections weighing 4 and 8 tons laterally ejected at 80 miles an hour, landing 600 feet in every direction. Looks more like the volcanic eruption in the Tongan Sea, with upward, outward ejected solid molten objects trailing thick white smoke clouds. So we can begin to get a real sense of what happened here. They told us it was an apple, a collapse, a structural failure, but it's obviously an orange, which is a incredibly explosive event. If the upper structure drove the rest of the building down to the ground, we wouldn't see these few remaining columns for 6 seconds, standing in the air 1,000 feet, core columns, until they begin to, they apparently get another explosive charge at the bottom, taking the knee out from under them and falling straight down through the concrete powder, which has been shaken off of it. Frame by frame, we see the top piece falling through. So this is not a crush down, crush up theory. This is an explosion around the core columns, leaving them intact. So it's a lie. And that lie carried into the NIST report, which got $20 million, NIST did, to create this report, tasked by Congress to show us how and why all 3 towers collapsed. But they failed to do exactly that. So we have to look through these features of controlled demolition and find out what could have done that. For instance, are there witnesses of explosions, just like we had in Building 7? Oh, yeah. The oral histories were produced by Thomas von Essen. And he, within a month of 9/11, recorded hundreds of his first responders. Guess what? 186 of them are witnesses of not a collapse, but explosions. Let's look at Graham McQueen, by the way, found these by reading 12,000 pages of testimony. And here they are. We felt the ground shake. You could see the towers sway. And then it just came down. So again and again, you're going to hear the specific order of events. They see something, they feel something, they hear something before the towers collapse. All of a sudden, the ground just started shaking. It felt like a train running under my feet. The next thing we know, we look up and the tower is collapsing. It shook my bones. Shortly before the first tower came down, I remember feeling the ground shaking. I heard a terrible noise, and then debris just started flying everywhere. I saw flash, flash, flash at the lower level of the building. You know, like when they demolish a building? With each popping sound, initially an orange, and then a red flash came out of the building. Then it would just go all around the building on both sides. Saw a number of brief light sources being emitted from inside the building between floors 10 and 15. He saw about 6 of these brief flashes, accompanied by a crackling sound, before the tower collapsed. This is extremely important because NIST is saying, oh, those things that they heard, those explosions, that was the building falling down. No, they're very specific here. I saw low-level flashes. Flash, flash, flash. And then it looked like the building came down. You ever see professional demolition on those charges on certain floors and you hear that pop, pop, pop? When I heard that friggin' noise, that's when I saw the building coming down. An explosion appeared at the very top, simultaneously from all 4 sides. Materials shot out horizontally, and then there seemed to be a momentary delay before you could see the beginning of the collapse. How specific do they need to be, Ransom? I mean, it is as clear as possible. And how many of these witnesses do you imagine were included in the 116 witnesses that NIST reported on?
Probably none.
Absolutely zero. No, same true for Building 7, by the way, also. There was an explosion in the South Tower, one floor under another. When it hit about the 5th floor, I figured it was a bomb because it looked like a synchronized, deliberate kind of thing. Seemed like on television when they blow up all these buildings, it seemed like it was going all the way around like a belt. All these explosions. The building was blowing out on all 4 sides. We actually heard the pops. You know, you heard the pops of the building. I thought the terrorists planted explosives somewhere in the building. That's how loud it was. A crackling explosive. Another loud boom at the upper floors. Then a series of smaller explosions, which appeared to go completely around the building at the upper floors. And another loud earth-shattering blast, which with a large fireball that blew out more debris. The lower level of the building, you know, like when they demolish a building. That's what I thought I saw. Did you see any flashes? I said, yeah, thought it was just me. He said, no, I saw them too. Everybody, I think, at this point still thought these things were blown up. So I was fully expecting anything else to blow up. You were there when the planes hit? No, I was there when the building exploded. You mean when it fell down? No, when it exploded. Pretty clear what he saw.
Right.
Let me bring to your attention some additional first responders that, oh, where are they? Oh, I see. No, I won't be able to do that today. So we were, let's see if these buildings came straight down in a symmetrical fashion. Well, pretty much, but not at first. The South Tower begins to tip over at 20 degrees. So it's tipping over, falling off the building. So 20 degrees, it's has asymmetrical loading onto the building below. There's asymmetrical loading from the fire damage up above, asymmetrical damage from the planes. How in the world then do we get complete symmetrical damage all the way down each face of the building, like the firefighters described, like a belt all around the building, all these explosions? It makes no sense given what's going on up above in the South Tower here. Let's zoom in to the leading corner of these explosions and ask ourselves, what are we looking at in this looped video? I see about a dozen relatively small, isolated explosions, timed floor by floor, which is what you do in controlled demolition. So what can cause that? And especially this isolated squib or further down below, several floors there. This is not a nuclear weapon going off, as some have theorized. These are small, isolated explosions. This is not directed energy weapons, as others have proposed. These are isolated, pre-placed, synchronistically timed, floor by floor explosions. And it can only be that. It's very clear. Yeah.
So that's how the, basically when you're looking at the top of it tipping, the only way for it to come down straight is if all of the material was removed before that it fell into it. Is that correct? What you were talking about before, because you have an equal and opposite destructive force. It's just falling right into nothing because everything below it is being removed while it's falling down.
That's absolutely correct. That's what the evidence is showing us. In fact, we'll get back to the South Tower and its fall in this section when we see these isolated explosive ejections occurring. In fact, 20 stories down below, 40 stories down below. In fact, even as far as 60 stories down below. There's no accounting for these squibs or isolated explosive ejections in the official narrative whatsoever. And to answer your question more directly, we have the South Tower where we show dozens off the left side of this looped video of explosions blowing out all at once, completely dismembering the structural steel frame inside the structure such that it can't act as a rigid body and roll off the side. If we had this longer, we would see a little more tipping, but then it settles into itself and actually follows the building fairly straight down because it's lost its rigidity due to these explosions. Even after it begins to tip over, these explosions are obviously wirelessly controlled, or the wires might have severed also. But how fast is the building coming down? Again, David Chandler, physics teacher, clocks the building, and this one comes almost as fast as free fall acceleration. It's still accelerating like the bowling ball falling out of the sky, but not quite as fast because there's some resistance, 10% resistance, meaning 90% of the resistance of the columns has been removed. And that's just where the calculation leads you to. But wait a minute, where did all of this incredible resistance go? We have 90,000 tons of structural steel in the building, 14-inch square steel tube columns, every 3 feet, 4 inches around the building. They are an incredible structure known as a Verandil truss, which is a orthogonal truss designed in this case to resist the hurricane force winds at the top of the building. That made it 20 times stronger than it needed to be to resist the gravity loads, according to the engineers. So a lot of this force had to be overcome because it couldn't, the top part of the building couldn't possibly crush it. And we'll see what Zdeněk Bezant did with that problem, massive problem, mathematically, that he had. But there's 287 columns altogether, 47 massive core columns in the building. So let's first look at the lateral ejection of these freely flying structural steel sections impaling themselves in skyscrapers all around the building, destroying the Winter Garden 600 feet away in the World Financial Center. We can see them ejected laterally, and they're freely flying. It's not like a banana peeling, laterally. Wait, what do we see here? Whoa. Back to, forward to, obviously freely flying, but look, it starts out horizontal. How does gravity work? Down. What's going on here? Out. There's a lot of force here, and that one is going past World Trade Center 7. So what's it trailing? Thick white smoke clouds. Are steel beams flammable? No, not unless they're burning on the end of them with thermite cutter charges, shaped cutter charges. So, which were patented prior to 9/11. There's enough energy here to hurl eject a 200-pound cannonball 3 miles.
Wow.
This is really rather amazing when you stop to think about it, and there's hundreds of them. The building's 200 feet wide. Maybe there's a pile that, extends a little bit outside of that. But here we're in a 1,200-foot diameter, in fact, well beyond the site of the World Trade Center, impacting 600 feet in every direction. So, by the way, if 100,000 tons of steel framing is ejected in a 1,400-foot diameter all around the towers, and hardly any of it, by the way, at the bottom of the towers, we have to ask ourselves a question. What's crushing the building?
Right.
It's not available to crush the building. This is easily half the weight of the building, which
what
used. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say, so what you're saying is a large amount of the mass is being removed, which is the explanation that they give for the collapse. So half of the mass is not even there to push down on the building. It's being ejected out.
Precisely. So we have to ask ourselves, what about the other half of the mass? Well, most of that is concrete. We're looking for 110 floors, each an acre in size. Concrete poured on metal decking supported by lightweight steel joists. There was 110 of them. We don't find 50. We don't find 10. We don't find 1 acre-size floor or even half acre or quarter acre. Here's a pancaking collapse. We see the pancakes. We should have seen something like this at the World Trade Center. The concrete is missing. Where did it go? Oh, there it is. It's pulverized in midair. 90,000 tons of concrete pulverized in midair from each building. All the photos, all the videos show exactly that. Pulverized to 100 micron particles, by the way, which is like baby powder, distributed throughout lower Manhattan from river to river in a 3 square mile area in a blanket 3 inches thick. Well, wait a minute. If all the concrete, which is more than, which is a lot of the rest of the weight of this building, is spread across lower Manhattan like this, it's not available to crush the building either. So it wasn't the steel. It's not the concrete. Together, that's easily 7/8 of the weight of the building. Wait a minute. Didn't Zdeněk Bazant use all of that weight in his theory, which remains the key theoretical basis for NIST's column failure theory today? Not only that, he fraudulently doubled the mass, almost doubled it, above the point of plane impacts. And he fraudulently decreased the column strength below by a factor of 3, thus forcing the building in his computer mathematical model to fail. It was rigged in favor of a collapse.
Like the real thing.
And I told you it took engineers like Tony Zamboti 10 years to decode. Well, they decoded it. They submitted a peer-reviewed paper to the American Society of Civil Engineers Journal of Engineering Mechanics, because they're proving how a previously published paper was wrong. But these errors were upheld by the American Society of Civil Engineers. Why? They wouldn't publish it, in fact. The reason given, it's out of scope. Wait a minute. How is it out of scope to publish a paper that challenges the results of a previously published paper? That's the whole point of peer-reviewed science and peer-reviewed papers. So there are lawsuits involved in this. So we'll keep you up to date on that.
All right.
But just asking ourselves a question, how could the nanothermite incendiaries, which were liquid applied in a paint of some kind, be applied? Well, could it have been during the fireproofing upgrades, which happened in the years before 9/11?
All right.
In the same places where the plane impacts hit also. Coincidentally, this is research performed by Kevin Ryan from digwithin.net. And we need more work on that too, but great job, Kevin, exposing this. We also need more work looking into Ace Elevator, who had the largest elevator upgrade going on the 9 months prior to 9/11. It was quite a scandal. And in fact, they fled before the planes hit. And USA Today documented this. So the elevator hoistways, which this was all documented in Elevator World, March 2001. The elevator hoistways are immediately adjacent to the core columns and beams in the building. So they certainly had access in an undercover operation if that was what was going on for the modernization. So we really need to look into that as well as the destruction of evidence, because we have easily the largest and most perplexing structural failures in history. 400 truckloads a day. Taking this steel, starting just 2 weeks after 9/11, to China for recycling. This is the illegal destruction of evidence in a crime scene. Because before, investigators could get their hands on it, do a proper forensic investigation. Prompting Bill Manning, editor-in-chief of Fire Engineering magazine to cry out. Crucial evidence that could answer many questions is on the slow boat to China, showing an astounding ignorance of government officials to the value of a thorough scientific investigation. The destruction and removal of evidence must stop immediately, but it didn't. And so we look at the evidence that we've been compiling here, and we see that it has all 10 key characteristic features of controlled demolition, and some very uncharacteristic features as well, with the incendiaries and the explosiveness that we talked about. Most controlled demolitions are implosions, but this has a very different set of purposes. Fire can't account for any one of these features, let alone all of them. With additional circumstantial evidence, testimony, eyewitness testimony, forensic evidence, that becomes proof of controlled demolition, a body of proof that has convinced 3,600 architects and engineers to demand a new investigation. Again, many of them appear in the film series 9/11 Crime Scene to Courtroom, an unprecedented series taking hard evidence of 9/11 crimes to court. And many of them appear in the original documentary we made with 40 high-rise architects, structural engineers, metallurgists, chemists, physicists, controlled demolition experts, all laying out this evidence. And this is free to watch on YouTube and on our website, richardgage911.org. Also the film about the University of Alaska with Professor Halsey and his team of engineers performing the work that was tasked by Congress to NIST, but NIST failed miserably. And he shows that, no, this building did not come down by fire. He's one of the top forensic structural engineers in the country. And he compared two competing software programs with each other to verify his own results. And they both corroborated that this building did not come down by fire. Well, we've also made for PBS a documentary on Building 7, just 15 minutes long, narrated by actor Ed Asner. And it is really the first one you want to show somebody. It's free also on YouTube, if you can find it. There's been some tampering by Google, YouTube too, with our stuff, but you can definitely see it for free on our website, richardgage911.org, where you'll also find the evidence outlined that we've been talking about today for both Building 7 and the Twin Towers in the brochure, which you can purchase 100 of them and hand them out, or download for free and print it at your local printer. So send it to everybody you can find, every architect and engineer, because interestingly, Brown University has performed an analysis on the results of 9/11, and it's pretty dark. The cost of war, they call it. We have 1 million deaths minimum in the Middle East. We have 38 million displaced refugees. U.S. soldiers killed 7,000. How many have taken their lives since they got back home? 30,000. Astronomical catastrophe. $2 trillion caring for those who survived. $14 trillion on the longest war in U.S. history, Afghanistan. $8 trillion on the other post 9/11 wars, where Richard Clark gave us an insight into the takedown of 7 countries over 5 years, the goal of the Rumsfeld Pentagon, as General Wesley Clark revealed, including Iraq and Syria and Lebanon, Yemen, Somalia, and others. Iran, for instance. So the truth about 9/11 is even darker than that. That's just the cost of war. We have the decimation of our civil liberties with the Patriot Act, the Military Commissions Act, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012, which means any of us can be arrested now without a right to a lawyer, a trial, a jury. We can be tortured. We can even be assassinated. And it's happened with American citizens with a no due process, merely with being associated with terrorism, which is undefined. So we got to ask ourselves, where do we draw our line in the sand? Do we wait for the next 9/11? Well, guess what? It already happened over the last 3 years with the false disease and the false solution that they've provided, which is neither safe nor effective. So At some point, we got to start speaking the truth about 9/11, just like Ransom is. In fact, we may think we're small potatoes. What can I do? Look what a 2 millimeter sized domino can do.
Boom.
We're going to leverage ourselves.
Right.
That was 13 dominoes. If I had 29 dominoes, the last domino would be as tall as the Empire State Building.
And that's what we're up against. The deep state has the guns, the bully pulpit, the media, and the money. And but collectively, we are more powerful. There's billions of us. There's 300 million of us in the U.S. Working together. The 9/11 Truth Movement can, if we just tell 2 other people and ask them to tell 2 other people, the leveraging capability, if you share this podcast that Ransom and I have worked hard to bring to you, then you can be doing your part. Because otherwise, what are you going to do when your grandchild, what are you going to say? Your child asks you, "What? We're in a deep state. We're in a totalitarian government, a nightmare. What did you do, Daddy, Mommy, to stop this problem?" I hope you have a good answer, and I hope we've helped to provide you one. Thanks, you guys, so much. This is what I wanted to bring to your attention.
Yes, and we appreciate it. You know, I had some points kind of to the way you rounded that off. You know, you had a whole list of the cost and the length of time we were in Afghanistan. And now, you know, we fast forward to the future and we get to see how that's turning out. And it's yet in another large weapons transfer, if you want to call it that, where our supposed enemies just took control of all of the resources that were allocated from taxpayers to fight this war against certain groups of people and then to hand over. And, you know, I know a lot of my audience is very educated on it, and they know, all the way from the beginnings about how our government is intertwined with ISIS, funding, arming, training, and, things like this. It actually goes back, believe it or not, a lot of it is connected to stuff like Gladio and Operation Northwoods and things like that. That were in the Cold War. And you see with the headlines today that they are not done with what a lot of people would call World War III, that it continued, and that would be the Cold War. And we're now just kind of rounding that off to show the world what the plans were. Another aspect is that I've been showing probably for the last 5 years, hammering people on the idea of artificial intelligence and how it'll play a role in the warfare that we're now seeing. And believe it or not, I got all of that information from the same think tank people that brought us 9/11. Back then, they were talking about by 2025, we would have a mostly AI Air Force. We're starting to see that today, the use of drones in warfare, as people are probably seeing live right now. And I'm glad that you added, the aspect of our civil liberties to this whole thing, because that's what it's always been about. And in my opinion, 9/11 was more about that than it was as an excuse to invade those countries, because the populace here, if educated, are the only people that could probably stop future events like this from happening or allow them to get away with it. And, you kind of touched on assassination, and we have seen that. I think his name was Anwar al-Awlaki, and him and his child both. It was a 16-year-old, no trial, nothing. And if there was, it was done in secret, which is another thing brought to you by, the Patriot Act and things like that. And they haven't changed their tune to this day. I think they just voted in where they allow, illegal well, it's not illegal. They made it legal. FISA warrants to spy on Americans now. So the whole thing has been one large dictatorial incremental move to kind of get us in the place that they put us. And you referred to the last couple of years about this, test or beta to see how easily they could lock people down and get them to believe anything that they say. And I really believe the Mockingbird media hammered this generation, which would be born after 2001. And I know there's a lot of esoteric stuff I've covered with, my audience before. Everything about it was planned. Seemingly to me. And, and before I forget, I wanted to mention, I know this is kind of off the wall there, but when you were showing the video of one of the main towers collapsing, and in the video, you see these giant steel, supports going way high up in was that like 2 or 3 stories worth of it?
It was 1,000 feet.
1,000 feet. Yeah. If the building came crushing down on it, why were those not bent, torn, or anything? It looked like the material around it was removed all the way, and that was just the skeleton. I get sidetracked, but kind of in closing, what is the major, I guess, accomplishment that would be achieved by exposing to the average everyday citizen, and something like in a way that it would be more recognized nationally and by people that watch mainstream media? Because I'm sure if they watch mainstream media to this day, they probably don't know what Building 7 is. They don't realize that there was, millions or trillions of dollars missing and a whole scandal. And, recently they admitted that they don't know what happened to $4-point-something trillion now. And if they would go through the links they did in 2001, imagine the links they would go to continue, basically the greatest transformation of wealth and power and freedom that's happened to civilization. We're in a spot where it doesn't seem like it's related because it was 20 years ago to a lot of people, but everything they enacted is how they're dealing with people today. And I don't think they would have got away with, convincing people to wear masks. And you saw around the world, it wasn't just here. There was a complete totalitarian move to see how much they could control each and individual person. And now we're in a more of a technocratic system, because they've allowed their programs to get us into a point where every single human being is now tracked and traced. How do we, use all of this to our benefit? I guess is what I'm asking. The knowledge. I know that was a lot to throw at you.
Yeah. Well, we can't sit on this information. I've provided the audience here with scientific forensic evidence and eyewitness testimony, which is irrefutable, overwhelming. And it's got to be used, though. If it sits on the shelf or in the back of people's minds, nothing will be done. If you simply share this podcast with people, not only that already know you're a conspiracy theorist, but those who may in fact call you one when you send this link to them, you need to take that risk, because they're going to ask you at some point, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me? I mean, right. Grow a pair. People, Ransom works very hard every day trying to bring you this kind of quality information. If you're not sharing it, then people can't learn and work together and bring down the apparatus that brought us Gaza another false flag operation that brought us 9/11. So, and now we're being dragged into World War III as of today with Iranian drones heading toward Israel. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. So, you know, you got to stop just simply saying, "Oh, I got my job, I got my kids. I can't upset my boss or people at work with this. I got to keep a low profile. I got to stay under the radar." Bullshit. Let's come out and let's take a stand. Okay, that's what we're doing. You can do the same. I mean, that's what Ransom and I are doing.
Right.
Talking to the rest of you out there.
You know, another thing I was going to ask you is, like, today when you try to watch media, I'm sure you have a different perspective than you did 2 decades ago, especially, you know, researching everything there is with this event. Do you still see, you know, I guess I would say indicators, you know, when you're looking at the news and stuff, that you can just immediately tell that the story is not what they are saying it is? So in other words, like when events happen, they tell you. I would love to have you back on any Saturday to talk about exactly that, and maybe we can just leave YouTube out of it so you can completely openly talk here.
Oh, you'll have to, or you will lose your
Right.
station like
Right.
I've lost 3 of them myself.
Here on Revolution.Radio, it's uncensored, so we'll get a chance to say that. I'll probably cut the COVID part out of it for YouTube, so you guys on the radio got to hear that. But yeah, thank you for coming on. I appreciate the presentation, the factual-based, point-by-point way that you do it, and I would love to invite you back on any Saturday, open mic, to talk about whatever you'd like to talk about.
Great. I'll be back then. We'll do it, Ransom. We've got to get the word out there about all of this.
That's very dirty.
Why can't we stop it? The bigger this war gets, the more freedoms we lose. Can't you figure this out? Look around you. Look how far we've come. Humanity wasn't meant to live like this. Our every waking moment, tracked and traced and scanned. It's time to stop submitting to this tyranny. It's time to realize that we're being enslaved. Uh-oh, it's our tax dollars at work. Protect us from ourselves. Hey guys, I used to be one of you. Stop selling out your own species.
Guess I'll just close my eyes. Why do I stay high? Why do I stay high? last day, for the last day.
That's why I get high. That's why I get high. I'm holding on to my soul. When it goes, put it on the floor. And then when I go, remember the big, cause something I gotta come my own with phone. Mugging with the through your dough. I'm speaking of the last time when I touch the child. It wasn't even know when I keep her on. My song and turn it up. She good and cookies, boom, 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 boom. Stars, but it was the world over the destiny of a song. So much while I wasn't lost. Chose, but it will not stop. Won't throw shots, don't drop. Won't love. And if I could teach the world to be good like me, then probably every day the world goes right around. I see it's a small world after all. I can go meet and I groove with my fans. Smoke a little weed and have a little laugh or talk. But every now and then I get caught up in a playation. No one's wrong with this nation, erasing. But if I could teach the world to be a thug just like me, you can live your lifestyle worry-free in the arms of the Lord eternally. No mystery, but take the lessons of the soul. A warrior, wasteland warrior, so true, divine, it's mine. East 1999, it's where you find it, all of my kind every time.
If I could teach the world to be a thug, harmony, then I would teach the world thugs just like me. If I could teach the world to be a thug, harmony, then I would teach the world thugs just like me. We stand as united and fought and divided. My thugs is the tightest, as good as I got us. They only define us, the skillers and fighters, the critics and writers. Next step when they turn our story, the word to be warrior, that's for sure. And that's thugs with more. I got it, we got too much shit to give, got shit to give. That's bitch, but still understood by the older folks, the little kids. Follow me, we know the way to go. Follow me, and that's why I stay high. 'Cause I got shit to deal with. The government is begging to deal with. Wanna hurt this, but I got you more niggas you just can't fuck with. Artillery you can't come with, nigga. Better let it rest. Shit to the little boys and girls all over the world. This shit that we say from the streets, for you going to do. Artillery, please, if we can, no more murder. Amongst ourselves, if we can, no more murder. If I could teach the world to be a thug, harmony, then I would teach the world thugs just like me. If I could teach the world to be a thug, harmony, then I would teach the world thugs just like me. Why do I stay high? 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 Why do I stay high?
Why do I stay high? I saw death rising from the earth, from the ground itself, in one blue field.
present for my friends at Thanksgiving.
Guess I'll just close my eyes.
Look out for that truck! Honk, honk! Look out for that taxi! Boing! Brake, brake! Honk, honk! Honk! What's that? Look! It's the towers! They're falling!
are tolerating the cultivation of the opium because we know that if we were to destroy it now, the population would turn against the Marines and it would be a real security risk. Let me introduce Lieutenant Colonel Brian Christmas. He's the commanding officer of the 3rd Battalion, 6th Marines. Really a wonderful group of Marines here. I know that you care deeply about this contradiction, the fact that here you have one of the best fighting forces in the world ever mounted, and in a sense you're watching as this opium is being grown. I know it grinds at your gut. How do you deal with it? What are you doing about it?
Well, frankly, this is a part of their culture. So while it might grind in my gut, it's what they do. We provide them security, we're providing them resources, and we're providing them alternatives. And the alternatives are different crops to grow. They're getting the seed and the fertilizer to do it. They can rotate any of their crops that they want. If they want to get rid of their wheat and grow cotton for the winter, they can do that, and we're going to help them do it. So the same thing goes for the cotton.